This chapter will be dedicated to one of those concepts that is really easy to learn, and in fact most beginners know about it, but it's in fact quite hard to master, quite hard to take advantage in your actual games of it. This is control of the center. So pretty much every even casual amateur beginner player knows that you have to control the center, but how do you actually put that into practice, and how do you actually take advantage of it? Especially, when should we be happy with the central position we have, and when should we aim for more? When should we add extra pawns, and when should we push them forward? So that's a really hard question, and we'll start with a somewhat simple example, but at the same time a really hard level game between Anatoly Karpov and Tony Miles. So White started with d4. As you can see, from very early on, White took the lead in terms to occupying the center, and you see that after 6 moves they already have these 3 pawns right here. So c4, e4, and d4 in the middle. Black only really has moved this pawn to e6, but how do we actually benefit from this? Can't Black just react and rebuild their position in the center? How should we continue the game? Well, as you can see, one of the advantages White has here is that they have more flexibility to develop their pieces. For instance, if Black try to play a move like knight c6, we can simply kick it away, because there aren't really any great squares. Let's say if they play something like this, we could even keep chasing the knight away, and now just continue our normal development. Knight can come here. You can see that Black's pieces really have a hard time finding a square to replace that. However, this doesn't mean that automatically every single time we get a chance to push our central pawns, we should go for it, because, for instance, if Black went knight f6 instead, pushing here would only allow the knight to come closer to us. So we are not really gaining anything from this other than a trade. So it's probably wiser to protect our central pawn and prepare for an eventual further expansion. Maybe after we put some piece into this diagonal, either the pawn or the knight, to block the bishop's way, and then we can expand further into the center, into the e5 square, into the opponent's territory. Anyway, this isn't what happened in the game. In the game, Black went for the alternative knight h6, and they really didn't want to deal with the possibility of the knight being kicked away. But you can see that this is already a somewhat inferior square. We usually don't get active pieces on the edge of the board. You can see that the knight doesn't really have many places to go, so this is already not ideal for Black. The position is not comfortable. And here, this is a spot where many moves were possible. So we can prioritize development, a move like knight f3, a move like bishop d3. We could even think of castling to the queen side, even though we've weakened a little bit with this pawn push, but given that Black's pieces aren't too active, we could even consider it. But I want to show you this example because White went for a more ambitious strategy when it comes to occupying the center. So they went all in with f4, bringing 4 pawns into the 4th rank. And great players have found strategies to counter this type of centers, but they are really, really uncomfortable to face, and Black has to be really precise, and they really won't have a great time against this. Okay, so Black now decided to react, to not allow White to keep building the center further. So if they play something like this, the game could continue. This position will always be more comfortable, better to play for White, because the pieces have more mobility, have more places to go, more squares to choose from. You can see that Black's pieces aren't really restricted on don't have many places to go. And of course, if we placed this knight somewhere else, so let's go back and move. If it came here, we always have to think about this possibility, so it's really uncomfortable. And black has to be happy with just keeping their pieces on the first and second rank or near the edge of the board like this knight. And meanwhile, white has many different squares to develop behind their central pawns. Okay, so black decided to react and play the f5 move. So trying to put some stop to white's center. However, white here can simply reply by pushing pawn to e5. They don't want to trade because now the knight would find a somewhat good square. This pawn cannot really move to kick it away because of this threat and because potential checks over this diagonal. So if this pawn trade happened, black could be happy about the position. This is a good way the events could have turned out for black. But of course, white doesn't want to allow this. They don't want to allow black to take it either and trade one of the side pawns for a central pawn. So they just push forward. You may be wondering if it wouldn't have been better to play d5 instead, because this also reacts on the center, and in fact it doesn't allow the possibility to just push forward, because then black could take, so this would manage to open up the position. However, I think white is great after this, because even though the knight can come, you also see that this bishop got blocked by his own pawn, so yeah, this wouldn't be bad at all for white. So let's go back to the move on the game and white's response, which is to just push forward. And now black went for knight to f7. Probably castling was fine, or there were many other moves, but the idea is to try to break white's center like this. This is of course a bit ambitious. I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but makes sense. It's an idea. Also, the knight was doing really nothing on near the corner, so it's not bad. And of course, keep in mind that this would always be replied like this. So anyway, the game continued with knight f7, white castle on the queen side, because with no active pieces by black, the king isn't really unsafe. And if it needed a refuge later on, we can always play like that and get it behind the pawns. So black went ahead with his plan. White just ignored it and developed a piece, because after black takes, white can take back with the queen, and yeah, we've traded one of the pawns that built our center, but we still have a control of the position, so not really a problem. Black activated the rook, because when these pawns get removed, the rook will have a clear view on this file. But white simply ignored it. And this is actually a fantastic move, because in case black takes, white can simply take back. And if they take this pawn, we just play like this. And it's actually white that will lose this open file, and that will get a strong attack. So feel free to analyze this position and see that it's really, really bad for black, even though they've won a pawn. So black decided to move the knight to a6, preparing for the possibility to castle on the queen side, and then they can start thinking of open up this file. White played this move, which intends to stop black from just pushing the pawn and keeping it close. So white insists on wanting to open up this side of the board at a later stage. And after this trade, of course, black should still not capture the free pawn. They should just try to put the king into safety first. And here white played a move I really like, which is g4, because it puts pressure on this pawn. And in case white took, well, this would have to take back, and the superiority on the center for white would still be bigger. So black decided to take, but this really activates the white rook. Black defends the pawn. And here it's another moment where we really have to be careful about when we should push our pawns and when we shouldn't, especially because this is the type of mistakes beginner makes more often. So they won't really know when they are actually achieving something by pushing the pawns and when they are just creating targets for the opponent and putting themselves into trouble by pushing the central pawns. So here white played d5, and one of the downsides is, for instance, this knight will have a fantastic square, but it's really only the only downside to the move. And we're also blocking the bishop that was being annoying here and creating problems. So this is overall a great move. There's also the idea for later to continue pushing it, so expanding even more and creating some threats. Anyway, the game continued by black trading, and we take back, and black finally castles. Now white played rook h6, which is a multi-idea move, so we are speculating with taking. We want to double up the rooks on this file to target this pawn, and we also want sometimes to block over here, so in case a rook came to attack our queen, we can simply put our own in between. Black decided to just defend the pawn, and white said, okay, this won't really bring me anything because the pawn is really protected, so let's just try to invade in some other way. Here black finally captured the pawn, and the idea is they want to put pressure on this one, so this is in fact the problem with pushing the pawns too much, that sometimes we leave other pawns target to attack, but white will really prove that this isn't really the case in this situation. After takes and here, white simply ignore the threat. Why can they ignore the threat? I'll let you find the move. How would you win this game now as white? Think for as much time as you need. Okay, so the idea is to just take and come here and checkmate on the next move, right? So white simply ignored the threat, and now black said, okay, I'm gonna prepare the threat now, because this enables the option to block a potential back rank checkmate with the bishop. So now there could be a threat. But white played a fantastic move that, yeah, even somewhat decent players would have probably missed, because looks like it's the queen, the piece we need to target, but instead they decided to kick the rook away, and that stops the threat, because if they take here, we don't trade queens, we trade the rook instead. All right, so black changes targets, and white plays the same thing again. I'm gonna attack that rook and be really annoying. And now that black just, well, resigns themselves to, okay, no more attacking the pawns, here white keeps expanding and gets an even bigger advantage, so a transformation of the advantage. We have two great pawns, really disrupting black's position, not really letting the pieces go anywhere. And now we will actually make the final pushes into promoting one of these pawns. It's worth noting first that this trying to disturb the queen doesn't really work, because after these moves they take advantage of our pinned knight to kind of force a trade of queens, and really with fewer pieces on the board, the space advantage that our advanced pawns give us becomes less important. So important to keep that in mind. And that's why the move that was played in the game was just the other pawn. So pawn to e6. Obviously, they cannot just ignore everything. They have to do something about it. So after this take, now the pawn is ready to run. It's blocked right now, but we can help it, either the rook, the knight. In some way we'll break this blockade, and eventually you can see that white just managed to advance the pawn and get a crushing position in the end. This is how the game ended, and here black resigned because they cannot really stop the promotion. Anyway, I don't really want to focus on this later stage of the game. It's interesting, but stick to the main ideas. So building the center, knowing when to push and when not to push. So here, for instance, we can maybe consider the option to just add more defenders to the center. And finally, when we do push, how to be annoying, how to restrict the opponent's pieces, and which moves to consider and how to get an advantage from them. Let's go to our second example, where it seems like white has the upper hand on the center with these two strong central pawns, well defended, controlling the position, while black has also two pawns on the center, but maybe with slightly less space. So the pieces aren't really that free to move around. But here, Nimzowitsch, playing as black, found a great idea. And I let you think for a bit, how do we break this position? How can we destroy white's center? Okay, so it's not easy if we're not familiar with these topics, because we have to see some tactics. So yeah, I wouldn't expect many of the viewers to have found the right continuation, but it's really instructive, and let's learn from it. So what Nimzowitsch did was taking, which it would seem like counterintuitive, because now white's presence in the center is the same as before, but we've lost our own. Before this trade, we would never have to consider a threat like pawn to e5, kicking our knight away, for instance, and now we really have to worry about it. So if we continue with moves like let's attack the bishop, and now let's bring the rook here, this position would indeed be quite favorable for white. But here black went for a blow, and this blow is pawn to d5, which seems to lose a pawn but actually doesn't, so that's why it's a great move. And at the same time, it will lead to a position where black has again space and the pieces can move around. So the first question is, what happens if they take? Well, we simply knight to b6, and there's no way to stop us from recapturing the pawn. So after this, white still has one central pawn, but it's all by itself and it's well blocked, and it can never advance until we allow it to, and it doesn't really disrupt our pieces from moving. So we can move the bishops, we can move the knight. This knight is in a great square already, even though it could jump over here sometimes. So this is a good transformation of the position for black. They could have, of course, taken with the bishop instead, but that's really the same thing with an extra trade. We will, on the next move, take here, and the same topics apply. So what happened in the game is white simply retreated, and after these trades, you will notice that we get a similar kind of position. So we can put some of our pieces here to block the pawns. So this could be the bishop like this, or this could be the knight. And they don't really have a mass of pawns to push our pieces back. They have a lonely single pawn that we can block. You can see, in fact, that in the next move of the games, that's what happened. So black just developed their pieces around this square, so and this pawn. So either attacking this pawn or controlling the blocking square. You can see that on these situations they had to play h6 to stop this pawn from hanging. But other than that, you can see that all the moves were centered around that idea. And you may be wondering, if we go back, why do we have to play in this way? So why do we have to sacrifice the pawn? Why is it important to do it like this? Can't we just kick the bishop away first and now push the pawn? Because if they take, we get pretty much the same type of position, right? Perhaps even a better version because we've been maybe a bit faster. Problem is, after white moves the bishop away, then this move isn't really forcing. We are not attacking a bishop here, so they don't have to take. They can just push the pawn forward. And now white achieves exactly what they want from their center, which is to make our pieces uncomfortable and force them to retreat. Notice the difference in space each side has with these 2 pawns on the board versus these 2 pawns removed. Mainly this square and this square are inaccessible for black. So that's why it's very important to play this move in a way that attacks both the bishop and the pawn, because now they cannot just reply by advancing or ignoring our threat. They have to do something about it. So either retreat and protect the pawn or take it. And that's why when we get the type of position we were looking for. Let's go now to this final example where white is preparing some sort of attack. So black's pieces are defending for now, but maybe the pawn can help in removing the knight away. Notice that if this knight wasn't here, then this pawn would be pinned, and there would start to be some worries about tactics here. Also, white has a bit more space, so they have a pawn on the fourth rank controlling some of these squares. Meanwhile, black's pawns are a bit more restricted in the fight for the center. However, white's pieces are a bit uncoordinated and focused on attacking the king side of the board. Even this bishop is also targeting this side too. So what will happen often in this type of situations is that the side that is defending, quote unquote, should seek for a counterattack on the center of the board, because opening up the central files will prove that this rook shouldn't be here. It should be controlling the files, also the queen. So one option to achieve that could be maybe to try to trade this pawn. But yeah, after this and taking here, this loses a pawn. And after this attempt at a fork, white can simply reply like this. Probably not great. So if we go back, the best option we have in this position as black is pawn to e5, trying to get these files open, where we have our rooks, of course. And so now there are two options for white. If they take, this loses to this fork, because if they try to be really smart about it by exploiting the pin, we simply take, and there was a checkmate threat over here, but by removing the rook, there isn't really any more. So this would open up this threat, but we just go back, and no problems here for black, and they've won the exchange. So they cannot take. They could try to maybe reinforce it, but this doesn't really work because of this pawn. And yeah, moving the queen would bring up some discovered attacks. So the only real option is to ignore it, to say, okay, black is striking in the center, but I will attack first, and I will checkmate the enemy king before they arrive. So white launches h4, Black, of course, takes to open up lines in the center. And now h5, kicking the knight away. But notice that since the white pawn isn't here, now there's a black pawn instead. The idea of the fork comes back to life again. And here, black gets a dominant winning position. So we can see that this reaction on the center by pushing our pawn to e5 and open up lines for the bishop and the rook and the other rook, even the queen, speculating with this threat. This was the right strategy to play. So when our opponent abandons the center, we take the chance to strike on it and open up the position for our pieces. Okay, so this has been a complicated chapter, and this is indeed the final explaining video, so the final video explaining a new strategic concept in this course. Now, please check the exercises that will be similar to the ones we did after the king safety section, but now we will see all of the themes from this course combined. And of course, you will have the solution in video format as further chapters in this course. So I hope you found the materials enjoyable. As I've said so many times, these are concepts that are really complicated in application because they are about the dynamics of the position, so there are many things to take into account. I don't want you to get lost and overwhelmed in the details. I want you to stick to the main ideas. So we care about keeping our king safe and making the opponent's king unsafe. We care about having active pieces. We care about the center of the board, and we cared about simplifying when we have an advantage, and of course avoiding simplification when it's the opponent in the material advantage. Okay, so take your time with the exercises, check the video answers to it, explore all the examples as much as you want and you can. And while you do the exercises, also check out the courses of the basic level, so basic endgames, basic opening courses that I will be starting to release, and also, of course, the basic tactics, which is the main component of chess improvement. And after that, we will have a conclusion chapter to the series that will explain what the next steps will be.